So I did decide to switch from the iPhone 16 Pro Max to the iPhone Air instead of getting an iPhone 17 Pro Max. Now I want to go over in this video why I made that decision, and this is completely legit. I'm not changing my mind later on. I am going to be using the iPhone Air as my iPhone until at least the next generation of Apple iPhones comes out. So let's get started. So you'll see on my channel that most of my content, probably 90% of my smartphone content or more, is related to Android. So I don't really cover a lot of Apple on the channel, and especially iPhones. And in fact, when it comes to buying iPhones, I typically buy one or maybe two per year. And beyond that, I am exclusively using Android. But for the record, I do have two active SIM cards that I use. So one of them is typically for an iPhone, and then the other is for whatever Android device I'm currently using. Also, at least through 2025, the Galaxy S25 Ultra has been my go-to Android device. Now, I am constantly testing other Android phones, but when I'm not, that is the default Android phone that I do go back. And because of that, that is another reason why the iPhone Air is my iPhone of choice. Now, I have been seeing a lot of content creators, and no offense to them, talking about them trying to switch to the iPhone Air and then later on deciding that they just cannot use it because they're a content creator. Now, I've also seen in the comments of some of their videos that people feel like if you are saying that you don't want to have an iPhone Air as your iPhone because you're a content creator, you're not really portraying the real life situation for a consumer who's not a content creator, which most of you watching these videos are probably not creators. So I do understand that there is kind of a divide there when it comes to the priorities of a content creator versus a general consumer. Now, fortunately for myself, while I do make a lot of videos and I make a lot of content, I do still want to be kind of like a normal person, and I'm not always just trying to max out things on my device, hence why a Max phone probably isn't necessarily the best fit for me, which it took me a long time to finally realize that after I got the iPhone Air. And it also helps too that, at least from my perspective, the only features that I'm missing from having the iPhone Air compared to my iPhone 16 Pro Max is the telephoto camera and the ultra wide. But beyond that, at least for myself, I haven't really noticed any of the other compromises that a lot of creators seem to be complaining about. Now, that being said, the iPhone 17 Pro Max does bring a lot of awesome upgrades to the table, and compared to the predecessor 16 Pro Max, it really is a much improved phone. So those faster charging speeds, for example, is something that I do see a lot of value in, and unfortunately that benefit did not carry over to the iPhone Air. So when it comes to things like charging speeds, this phone is very similar to the iPhone 16 Pro Max, especially if you're charging via USB-C. So that is unfortunate. I do like really fast charging phones. That's one of my favorite features when using pretty much any Android device. Almost every Android phone, even the cheapest ones out there, charge faster than even the iPhone Air. So that is a key feature that I do wish this phone had. But when it comes to other things, such as the speaker, I just don't really notice the single speaker here being much of an issue. And I am someone who does like to watch a lot of videos on my phone. Obviously, I consume plenty of content, listening to music, all of that. Of course, it doesn't get quite as loud, but it really hasn't been bad. It hasn't been bad at all. I've been seeing a lot of people saying that the speaker is just terrible on this phone, and it's just not. From my experience, at least, like, it sounds fine. I'm able to watch content. I'm not even thinking about how the speaker's bad. Maybe my ears have a problem. I don't know. But the speaker is totally fine on this phone. Yeah, it could be a little bit louder, sure, but day to day, I just don't notice that. Now, battery life on the iPhone Air, sure, it could be better, but honestly, I need to touch some grass. I need to get outside. I need to be off my phone. So this is actually the perfect phone for you to not use your phone quite as much, which I know is kind of counterproductive to spending $1,000 on a smartphone, but honestly, you just got to get out there a little bit more. But in all seriousness, the battery life could be a bit better, but it hasn't been something that's made this phone a deal breaker. And so far, so good. I do know that with every iPhone I buy, by the time you get to about a year with the iPhone, you just get really annoyed at the battery life slipping and getting worse and worse. That does go for most smartphones, but I think Apple's one of the worst when it comes to that. So I'm definitely not looking forward to the fourth quarter, I suppose, of owning this phone or using it until the next generation of iPhones. I do think that it probably will get pretty bad at that point. But at least for now, in the first month or so of having this device, the battery life has been fine. And I actually have a couple of those slim power banks, and I haven't even been using them with this phone. I've just been going regular as is with this device. And I have done a mix of traveling and obviously just being here in the office. When I'm at home, I'm not using my phone quite as much, or at least I have a charger nearby. But I was on a trip recently where I was out all day. And yeah, by the end of the day, the phone does get a little bit low on battery, but that's time to charge, So far that hasn't been an issue. So again, speaker, it's been fine. Battery, it's been fine. And that leaves us with the biggest compromise of the iPhone Air, and that is the single 48 megapixel camera. So yes, it is unfortunate that there's not at least an ultra wide here. However, I've got to say, compared to the Galaxy S25 Edge, that phone doesn't have as good of a main camera as this device. It does pick up the ultra wide, but I'm not sure if that compromise is worth it. I don't know. Would you rather have just one really good camera or two cameras that are just kind of average? I know from my perspective at least, I would rather just have one good main camera. Now, I don't actually think ultra wide's a gimmick. I do use ultra wide cameras on phones that have them a decent amount, but on the other hand, when I go through my gallery on my phone, it's not like I'm taking so many ultra wide photos that it's necessarily that big of a deal. And for the most part, a lot of devices don't have as good of an ultra-wide camera as the main camera. So again, that's why it's so key that the main camera is as good as it is, like what we're getting here with the iPhone Air. And there is one more massive benefit with this camera system that nobody is talking about with the iPhone Air. And that is that you can actually take close-up images of items and not have it automatically switch to that horrible macro ultra-wide camera. That is absolutely the biggest issue with iPhones, especially the Pro phones, because ever since I think the iPhone 12, when they switched over to that horrible implementation, have you ever tried that? Like if you want to take a photo of your food, for a second there, the preview looks good. Within a second, it switches to this horrible camera, and then you take your image and it just looks bad. There's no depth of field. It just looks terrible. And that's because it's trying to use the ultra-wide camera to give you this terrible macro mode. So since there is no ultra-wide camera on the iPhone Air, that is no longer a problem. I can actually just take my phone and then take a photo of something and it actually looks good. So I've been able to take some of the best looking food photos when using this phone, which is really honestly sad. I don't know why no one's talking about this. How iPhones are just so bad at taking close-up images, but that problem has actually been solved here with the iPhone Air. And then no telephoto is also a compromise, but looking back at my gallery, again, I haven't taken that many telephoto photos to necessarily justify having it. But, I mean, it is a feature I miss, but I think it is something that I can live without. Now, the digital zoom here with the 48 megapixel camera on this device is actually pretty decent. They've done a good job, but yeah, nothing's better than having an optical zoom with a true telephoto camera. So I do wish that was the case here with the iPhone Air, but it's simply not. But at least for now, it is something that I can live without, and I haven't really been missing it all too much. Okay, so to finish off this video, I know the whole video has been talking about basically all the bad things about the iPhone Air and all the features it doesn't lack, but I feel like these are things that have to be addressed more so than necessarily the form factor. We all know it's a very slim phone, it's a very light phone, and in real life, I've actually noticed a lot of benefits with that. It certainly is not weighing down my pockets nearly as much. It is noticeable. When holding the phone, it does feel a lot lighter, but at the same time, it's not so light or so thin here that it's inconvenient to use. So I definitely think this is the future when it comes to smartphones with them being this thin, and the camera plateau here barely sticks out. So I actually think this is a great look. I'm hoping that maybe future iPhones just give us additional cameras right here, so they kind of go across the plateau instead of just giving us half the phone as a camera module. However, I saw the Xiaomi 17 Pro Max, funny that they have the same name, but that phone has a full display on the back. So I do actually feel like moving forward, the Pro phones really need to up the Pro features so that there really is a bigger difference or more of a benefit to spend that money on a Pro phone versus going for something more like the iPhone Air or even the regular iPhone. But again, the thickness of the phone and the overall form factor of it is amazing. It's been very durable. That's well documented. Everyone knows that the phone's very durable, but definitely having this thin form factor, which I guess is the whole point of the phone, but maybe that's not something that I have to address so much in this video because it is kind of common sense already. You can go in the Apple store, you can check it out. I wasn't sure if there might just be a short honeymoon period where later on I just don't even care that the phone is thin and light. But honestly, even after a long time, this phone still does amaze me at how thin it is. And compared to whenever I use any other phone that's thicker, I do notice a difference. So it's definitely not a gimmick when it comes to the form factor of this device. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, kind of a little bit of a different piece of content from what I normally make. I just want to turn on the camera and just rant and give you my opinions about the iPhone Air. I know this is probably one of the more interesting smartphones that's been launched in the last couple of years. Obviously, on the Android side of things, there's all kinds of really interesting phones that come out, but Apple really hasn't changed a whole lot over the last 5 years or so, so it is really nice to see that we're finally getting something fresh from the company. I do think this is a phone that Steve Jobs would probably be pretty proud of, especially since it is kind of pushing the boundaries for Apple, and it really is provoking conversations about what's important with your phone, what features you truly need, what you can live without, and then also maybe giving you some reasons to not just be on your phone all day or just to have all of these features overwhelming you and to instead kind of simplify your lifestyle so you can use the most out of your phone that you need to, but at the same time, put the phone down and be present in this world. But anyway, thanks for watching this video. This is Kevin here, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care and have a great rest of your day.